Biden had plans to cancel some student loan debt, but now he's changing course. Is Biden's plan even legal? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. A lot of companies are collecting your personal data, even more than I realized. For me, it's well over 100 companies, most of which I've never heard of until recently. And I have no clue what they're doing with my data. But fortunately, Incogni helps me stop them. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. So, politicians are all about promises, even when those promises are less than feasible. Then politicians are all about backpedaling. In August, President Joe Biden announced his plan to deliver on his campaign promise to cancel student loan debt. According to the White House's announcement, Biden's plan included up to $20,000 in debt cancellation for Pell Grant recipients with loans held by the Department of Education, and up to $10,000 in debt cancellation for non-Pell Grant recipients. To qualify for the plan, you have to make less than $125,000 a year. The forgiveness plan was expected to wipe the slate clean for roughly 20 million Americans, with a total of 43 million being affected in some way. And the fact that he tried enacting this plan right before the midterms is a total coincidence. This is like a recently divorced dad taking his kids to Disney World and saying, "Having fun? Remember this when the judge asks you who you want to live with in November." Biden's forgiveness plan originally included privately owned, federal-backed student loans if borrowers had consolidated their loans into the federal government's direct loan program. But now the plan has changed. The Biden administration is scaling back its student debt relief. Because of course it is. The change has to do with the federal Perkins Loan and federal Family Education Loans programs, both of which expired some years back. Before last Thursday, the Education Department's own website said borrowers with privately held federal student loans can receive this relief by consolidating these loans into the direct loan program. Honestly, this student loan stuff is so confusing that you should get a college credit just for figuring it out. But on Thursday of last week, the department quietly changed the language. The guidance now says, as of September 29, 2022, borrowers with federal student loans not held by the Education Department cannot obtain one-time debt relief by consolidating those loans into direct loans. Okay, 180 degrees from what it was before. No big deal. But yeah, the Biden administration is narrowing the eligibility for student debt cancellation. His relief plan now helps borrowers who have government-held loans only, not those who have federal student loans held by private lenders. This leaves around 770,000 borrowers out of luck. For those borrowers, this is like a recently divorced dad saying he's going to take his kids to Disney World, but then he takes them to the dentist. Tell the judge you want to live with your mom. So why did this happen? An Education Department spokesperson explained that our goal is to provide relief to as many eligible borrowers as quickly and easily as possible. And this will allow us to achieve that goal while we continue to explore additional legally available options to provide relief to borrowers with privately owned FFEL loans and Perkins loans. It would appear that the FFEL and Perkins loans were causing problems for the entire debt relief package, so they had to be removed. In other words, we had to sacrifice the few now to save the many. It's like the trolley problem, but for people so crushed by student loans that they can only afford to travel by trolley. But what kinds of problems were coming from the FFEL and Perkins loans? Well, maybe the phrase legally available options gives us a clue. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. The Biden administration has gone back on part of its initial plan to forgive student debt. The legal challenges the Biden administration currently faces may explain why certain loan types were left behind. As of this recording, the Biden administration faces not one, not two, but 3 lawsuits. For now. Which probably makes Donald Trump think, only 3 lawsuits? Those are rookie numbers. The 3 lawsuits are coming from the Pacific Legal Foundation, Arizona's Attorney General, and a group of 6 Republican-led states. Legally, there are a lot of arguments against Biden's student loan relief plan. One argument is about how Biden's loan forgiveness would cause financial harm. The Pacific Legal Foundation initially argued that its employee, a Pell Grant recipient, would be injured because he would be forced to pay state income tax liability even though he doesn't want student loan forgiveness. But that argument didn't slide with the judge, since the Education Department allows borrowers to opt out and avoid having debts automatically discharged. So we pretty much heard someone say, I don't want to be forced to have my student loans forgiven, and the Biden administration be like, okay, we won't forgive them. But borrowers aren't the only ones who could receive financial harm from loan forgiveness. There's also the issue of how Biden's debt relief will affect businesses in the loan industry. These businesses rely on ongoing interest payments for profit. If Biden's initial debt relief plan went through, lots of borrowers would consolidate their FFEL and Perkins loans into Department of Education loans. And then the private companies servicing those loans would lose money. And you know how businesses are about losing money. Some of these companies are also quasi-state owned, like the Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority, which is one of the biggest holders and owners of student loans. So if they lose money, Missouri also loses money. Republican states are also arguing that their tax revenue is on the line, which they say could constitute economic harm. Republicans are arguing for taxes. Hey, I think there's a glitch in the simulation. White House spokesman Abdullah Hassan struck back, saying Republican officials from these 6 states are standing with special interests and fighting to stop relief for borrowers buried under mountains of debt. I wonder what counts as special interest here. He says Biden, on the other hand, is lawfully helping the working and middle-class families, at least the ones that were able to figure out this whole student loan maze in time. Biden's response to Republican critics, bring it on, which also just happens to be my response whenever someone asks what movie I want to watch. But the Biden administration's current 3 lawsuits might be just the beginning. And the fact that Biden reduced the number of eligible people for student loan relief shows that he's treading a very thin legal line. I'll explain after the break. Welcome back. The Biden administration faces several lawsuits for its student loan forgiveness plan. But Biden changed the rules to his plan, cutting off hundreds of thousands of people from qualifying for student loan relief. Administration officials said the change was a way to protect the entire program for more than 40 million borrowers as it faces legal challenges. And one legal challenge in particular. Many of Biden's critics argue that the Biden administration doesn't have the authority to forgive student debts without Congress's approval. They have a pretty strong case for it. Mostly, that's how things are supposed to work. But that's never enough, so here's another reason. Just last year, the Principal Deputy General Counsel of the Education Department wrote a legal opinion saying the Secretary does not have statutory authority to provide blanket or mass cancellation, compromise, discharge, or forgiveness of student loan principal balances, and or materially modify the repayment amounts or terms thereof, whether due to the COVID-19 pandemic or for any other reason. The opinion points to only Congress having the power to forgive student debt under Article 1, Section 7, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution, which states, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. But the Biden administration is trying to make an exception. It argues that the president can forgive student debt thanks to a 2003 law called the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act, or HEROES Act for short. And if you're wondering, yes, they absolutely put more time coming up with that acronym than they did drafting the law. The HEROES Act states that the Secretary of Education may waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provision applicable to the student financial assistance programs in connection with a war or other military operation or national emergency. In context, this was in reaction to the beginning of the Iraq War. Congress was primarily focused on ensuring that military members didn't default on their loans during their service. Not that context matters in this day and age. When Biden heard national emergency, he knew the magic word that matches the description: COVID. If only legislators back in 2003 spent more time closing potential future loopholes in laws and less time coming up with acronyms for them. That's almost as upsetting as the fact that a bunch of legislators from 2003 are still in government today. So now the Biden administration argues that they are authorized to relieve student loans to ensure COVID doesn't leave borrowers in a worse position.
Congress gave the Secretary of Education and the HEROES Act the authority to do this.
Well, look, and Ambassador Rice talked about this, that this is what the legal authority that we took is pretty much consistent with the HEROES Act, right, which is what she talked about, which authorizes the Secretary of Education to take certain actions. He believes they are necessary to ensure borrowers not placed in a worse position financially due to a national emergency like the COVID-19 pandemic.
But isn't everyone in a worse position financially due to COVID-19? Except for the richest people, of course, who doubled their wealth. Republicans suing against student loan forgiveness say Biden's forgiveness plan is not remotely tailored to address the effects of the pandemic on federal student loan borrowers as required by the HEROES Act. I'm surprised there's so much arguing over how to interpret the HEROES Act. They could just ask the dinosaurs still in Congress who wrote it to elaborate. Many point out that Biden never suggested that debt relief applicants have to demonstrate that they are in a worse position because of COVID. Instead, he introduced the program as broad and applying categorically based on income, not pandemic effects. Of course, the HEROES Act itself doesn't require the Secretary of Education to look at individual circumstances before waiving student debt. But the HEROES Act is still a stretch. Even if he did somehow demonstrate a strong connection between COVID and student debt, a senior vice president at Third Way, a Washington think tank, says it's on shaky legal ground at best. The connection to the pandemic is pretty exaggerated. Shaky is putting it lightly. The connection between student loan relief and the pandemic is about as strongly laid out as the connection that drinking milkshakes will make you an astronaut. What? It's obvious when you think about it. And using COVID as a reason for student debt relief now seems a little strange. I mean, Biden already said the COVID pandemic is over. This is kind of like a friend saying they need to borrow your jet ski due to flooding from Hurricane Katrina. Oh, that's the reason, is it? Biden's betting that his student loan relief plan will work thanks to the HEROES Act, but Republicans say that isn't enough. If Biden can't come up with any other statute or law to back up his plan, it's possible that he's violating the Administrative Procedure Act, which requires federal agencies to explain how it makes and enforces regulations. If this goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, it's possible that Biden would face scrutiny limiting him to the scope of authority Congress gives to him. And if Republicans win big in the midterm, Congress will give him about as much authority as a party cop. Even if Biden somehow got everything he wants, his plan isn't going to solve the student debt crisis in the long term. According to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, Biden's student loan relief plan will cost $500 billion. Yet all it's doing is kicking the can down the road for the same amount of debt to crawl back up in 2028. Even Democrats are aware that one-time debt forgiveness doesn't address the root problems. But they are still in favor of this plan, because this short-term solution might just solve their short-term problem, not getting wiped out in the midterms. And this episode has been sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. Your name, your email, your home address, your social security number, your student loan history, all sorts of things. What are they doing with your data? They're buying it, selling it, and trading it. Worse, the companies that are holding on to your personal information could get hacked. Earlier this year, the data of 2.5 million student loan borrowers was hacked. That included people's personal contact information, data that could be used in future social engineering and phishing campaigns. This kind of thing is why I signed up for Incogni. When I signed up in February this year, I discovered that there were 76 data brokers that potentially had my private information. Since then, that number has grown to 134. Fortunately, Incogni has been working hard to force these companies to delete my data. 8 months after signing up, Incogni had already gotten my details removed from 55 of these data brokers, with 79 more in progress. And I still haven't had to do anything after signing up. So get your data taken offline with Incogni. Click the link below or go to incogni.com/uncovered. The first 100 people to use the code UNCOVERED will get 20% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.